Alright, so what's going on, boys and girls? We're here with another reaction video, and this is by the lovely folks, oh God help me, over at Alley Ridge Media. And I've complained about wondering if I'd ever get the time back from my last two reactions from these guys and rebuttals about their Linux videos. This one makes me gonna want to bang my head even more because it's 35 minutes long. I might get a fucking ulcer. Anyway, let's roll into it and find out. I'm hoping there's some intelligence in this. God help me, please.
3, 2, 1. We are live! Not really. We are recording. Alright guys, what is up? So, Trevor and I are here in Studio A at our headquarters in Hackettstown. Just gotta, state that so you guys know we're real people, because this series is going to get rather heated.
It will be.
It's just gonna happen.
Absolutely.
Just gonna happen. Look up our address, link down. Don't do that. Don't come here. Don't, whatever. Regardless. So, Trevor had an idea recently, and I thought it was pretty good. We're gonna be making a series, a full-on series on Windows versus Mac versus Linux. When I was, back in the day when I was trying to figure out, what do I buy, a Mac or do I buy a Windows computer? Those are what I thought to be my only.
How far into this video are we now? About a minute. Again, I'm going to make a little recommendation, and this is a knock on your editor. This is a knock on you guys. For the love of God, shut the fucking music off after you do the intro. It is annoying as shit. I don't need to hear in the background every 10 seconds. Holy crap.
Two options, but there are a plethora of other operating systems, including Linux, which is a beast among itself, and we want to do a actual comprehensive test on what operating system is the best, and try not to utilize our opinion too much here, even though an opinion is always relevant.
Opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got two. Or I should say, well, most people only have one. Unfortunately, some people do have an asshole attached to their face because it spews a lot of shit. So, depending where you want to look, or you could justify and say that they kind of got two assholes. One just spewed shit from their face, and one spewed shit from their butt. From what I've seen from you guys thus far, you're more of the spew shit from the face.
So, Trevor, this is your series, though.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to go a little more into detail on what we're going to be doing in this series.
Well, as Eric stated, there are a lot of different operating systems out there. It's not as cut and dry as many people think. So we want to brighten people's horizons a little bit on what is out there and what is usable for the average consumer. So with that being said, let's just briefly talk what is the average consumer. It's your average person. It's your mom and dad, as long as they're not like a NASA scientist or something like that. It's the average person. That's why we're going to try to keep our opinions out of it as best as possible, because we're not always the average consumer, even us.
Nah.
But I know we've had experience with Linux, and we tried going down that rabbit hole for a little while, and we actually, I think, both enjoyed that for the most part.
Yeah.
With some issues here and there. And then with Windows, with a lot of the controversy right now with Windows deleting people's files and Windows updates sucking.
Windows updates.
It's been a bad year for Microsoft.
Indeed.
So with that, and then Mac OS, I don't know if they've had huge controversies recently, but they've had them, don't get me wrong.
And they still do. You want to talk about hardware? Oof, well, that's what we're talking about in this video.
Absolutely.
So this is the first video of the
And no, jackasses, you're talking about hardware support. Big difference.
This series. Today we're talking about hardware and driver support. And as we go through different tasks, we're going to be rating every single operating system.
Two things. How are you going to be rating them? Based on the driver support and the hardware support. And two, is it going to be on an equal playing field? Because right now I'm seeing a Mac and I'm seeing a Dell. And if you're going the route that I think you already went once, that's not even going to be a level playing field. because I'll get into that if you guys do what I think you're doing, and I'm going to call bullshit on that too.
At the end of every video, every operating system will receive a rating from 0 to 10. And we're not going to go into the details too much, but we have approximately 10 videos that are going to be made, so 100 points each operating system.
God help me. That means 10 more of these reactions where I'm going to want to bang my head against a fucking brick wall. I'll probably end up painting the brick wall with my friggin' blood because this these guys drive me up a fucking wall.
System can obtain. And at the end of the series, that is when we figure out what operating system is the best. But today, yes, we're going to start off with hardware.
Newsflash, that there isn't a best. It's just the best tool for the job and that you need at the moment.
Hardware.
And actually, it's really important to mention, what are we going to be testing all these operating systems on? Because every piece of hardware, you know, we have a MacBook in front of us, we have this Dell computer in front of us. We don't want to be testing a MacBook versus a Dell versus, you know, a custom-built, you know, Linux machine. That's not going to be a great comparison. So we want one computer to do everything. What's that computer, Trevor?
Though I know people will find a reason to complain about this, but we will justify ourselves in a second, but we will be using this lovely, what is it, a 2013?
2011.
11, I'm way
No, oh no, sorry, my bad. 2013.
Late 2013, 15-inch MacBook Pro Retina display with a 2.6 gigahertz Intel Core i7 with 16 gigabytes of RAM and a NVIDIA GeForce GT 750 with 2 gigabytes of video RAM.
So, in all reality,
this test is already skewed to the Mac. Isn't that lovely?
it's not the most up-to-spec machine.
No.
I mean, even this Dell computer in front of us having a 7th gen i7, a NVIDIA 1060 GPU, plethora of RAM, SSD storage, whatever. You know, this is a really powerful machine, way more powerful than this MacBook. But at the end of the day, the raw power of the machine isn't fully relevant.
No.
You know, I can't really run all the operating systems on this Dell. I've tried to make it a Hackintosh. It's just not working out for me. So we thought, well, we can use Boot Camp with the MacBook, install Windows 10.
Or here's a better idea. Just maybe. Find similar spec machines as your fucking little MacBook there and fucking do a comparison that way. Novel idea. Same amount of RAM, same type of hard drive, same type of as close to spec as you can find. Because I can already tell you the one machine that I'm thinking of, that there was a Lenovo Y50, I believe. It was one of the earlier Lenovo machines. Same specs, same graphics card, same everything. And so you have a Windows box, you have a Linux box, and you have your Mac. And they all run on different stuff with the same fucking hardware, essentially. You dumb motherfuckers.
As well as Linux. But wait a second, what Linux version are we using?
That is an excellent question. We are using Ubuntu essentially. So Ubuntu with KDE over it.
Okay.
FYI, it's not KDE, it's Plasma. Get your shit right.
Because that's what we kind of prefer, generally speaking. I know.
Yeah.
I mean, look. That's another thing people will criticize us, depending what version of Linux.
course.
There's hundreds, if not thousands, of different distros.
And no, we're not going to criticize you for the whatever version of Linux you are. Oh, okay, some idiots might, but most of us really don't care what distro you run. Use what works best for you. What we will criticize is fucking stupidity and blatant stupidity. I'm already seeing it. I'll let you do that math. Maybe I should start adding a counter down at the bottom for how many times I hear something stupid. Does Infinity actually have a number?
Linux. We chose one that's pretty mainstream, being off the Ubuntu platform, which has the most amount of driver support, software support, things like that. But we do prefer, well, at least I prefer, I won't talk for Eric, but I prefer the KDE interface, so that's what we chose to use.
Ubuntu, at the end of the day, it is one of the most relevant Linux distros. It has a good amount of support, a lot of people behind Ubuntu, which is not something you can say for all of the other distros in the Linux world. So Ubuntu, I think, is just gonna be the best for all this. And you know, listen, just because we're testing Ubuntu, it's not 100% Ubuntu versus Windows versus Mac, because in some regard, all Linux distros can kind of relay the same.
Of course.
You know, Ubuntu, it's going to work best for our testing purposes. And you know, if we find, you know,
What do you do when your testing purposes are flawed from the get-go? Just saying. You're not doing an experiment the right kind of way, honestly, in my take.
Ubuntu does this and this and this great, there's a relatively good chance that all of the other Linux distros are capable of doing this, this, and this proper. I said that a little poorly, but the point you made is Ubuntu is one of the more user-friendly versions of Linux. And that's really important as we want to really compare this to the end-all consumer.
Of course.
So with that said, we need to dive into some of this hardware. And so we're gonna be breaking this down with first talking about the CPU support and then jump into the GPU support. So in terms of...
For the love of God, just get to the point of the video, please.
CPUs, on Windows, you're gonna be able to utilize Intel as well as AMD, the top two, you know, CPU providers.
Of course.
On the Mac operating system, you're going to be able to utilize Intel because out of the box, Apple supports Intel. AMD though, not so much.
No.
And then jumping to Linux, you're going to be able to utilize Intel and AMD for the CPU.
Well, I should also mention, not that every Linux distribution supports this. However, even...
And oh my God, shut the music off. It's so fucking annoying. Oh my God, 35 minutes of this and I'm going to bang my head against a wall. Where's that fork? I might cut my heart out with a spoon at this rate. Holy crap.
have extra support on Linux with like ARM-based processors and things like that.
That is true. I can run Linux distros on something like a Raspberry Pi, and the Raspberry Pi that uses, you know, an ARM-based chip, not Intel, not AMD, nothing with x86.
Yeah.
Whether or not that is completely relevant to the end-all consumer today, whatever. But the fact is, it does have that support, and that is fantastic.
And it could be relevant tomorrow for the end-all consumer, because though consumers, generally speaking, nowadays, like aren't going to be running ARM processors. We've talked a lot about them in the past of even Apple moving to those type of platforms in the future. Microsoft going there with some of their ARM, tablets for a little while. However, I'm not going to call Windows totally ARM supported. I'm sorry.
No, you have a lot of performance issues.
Yeah, I'm not going to call that done yet. But I got to give Linux credit where credit is due.
Of course.
Where they definitely have, at least right now, the most amount of processor support.
Anyway, at this point, Trevor, can you kind of take away the GPU support side of things?
Absolutely. So you have two basic mainstream GPUs out there. You got NVIDIA-based GPUs and AMD-based GPUs. For an operating system like Windows, it's going to support both pretty much perfectly without any issues. That's really what both these companies are designing their drivers and their hardware support for. With something like Mac OS, you have actually decent-ish support for both, at least on some older operating systems. I'll kind of explain where right now Apple's using AMD graphics cards in their computers, so AMD chips are supported natively right now with like Mac OS Mojave. However, they do still support NVIDIA chips, like my MacBook here having its NVIDIA GeForce GT 750. So they do support some NVIDIA chips still on the latest versions. In like a past version like High Sierra, you could even use like a 1080 Ti or something like that with NVIDIA's web drivers, which are right from NVIDIA, so it's not like some hack support or something like that. It's totally official.
It works out of the box.
Works out of the box. However, this is where things get tricky because in new versions, Apple's made that a little more difficult to do. So they're definitely, I can't say support all the latest NVIDIA chips right now.
NVIDIA now.
No, so unfortunately. However, they have great AMD support. And then with some...
Shock and surprise. Apple has limited support because they have fucking limited SKUs of hardware. Novel concept.
something like, well, pretty much any flavors of Linux, you pretty much roughly have decent support for both. However, we have to go a little more in detail about GPU support in Linux specifically, because at times it's hit or miss, and it hasn't been great at other times. It is getting better, but we should definitely go into that a little deeper.
Yeah, sometimes with Linux, it goes through waves. There could be a period of time where NVIDIA has like 6 months of solid, great support for their drivers, but then they start to not care as much, but AMD picks up, and AMD, offers really good support. But then, as Linux evolves and as their cards evolve, they start dropping off support until someone, punches them a little bit and they wake up and they're like, oh yeah, Linux people, let's give you the drivers. So on a good day, you have support for both. And if you try hard enough, you can get any card really working on Linux, just about. But if you want to talk more consumer grade here, you can get both to work. They're just not always super reliable.
You stupid, dumb, motherfucking morons. Welcome to computers and drivers in general. You might get 6 solid months of support and releases. NVIDIA drivers on Windows? Anybody? AMD, the proprietary drivers on Windows? Anybody? How many times have they broken games? Or how many times have they broken just the desktop? Mac OS doesn't even fucking support half of NVIDIA's shit. Because Apple only has limited SKUs. I love how there's a dichotomy of like, oh, it's not bad here. It's not bad here. But here's some caveats that are applied exactly to the same application process to the other two that you just mentioned. That is a load of shit. Now, I'm not saying the Linux drivers are the best, because they have their own issues and they are missing features. I'll be the first to say that. I think AMD is getting a lot better than it used to be. I remember running ATI cards. Now, that was back a long, long time ago in 2006, before it was AMD, and ATI was its own thing. So, I could already see the bias kind of rolling in. It's not ready for consumers. Oh my God, the snark from you guys and the friggin', oh, but, if it's not Mac or if it's not Windows, and you mention any passing of Linux, I can already tell it's, but we have to mention this. But we have to mention that. Give me a fucking break.
I think that is something really to beat home about, is even though you can get great Linux support for these GPU drivers, they're not always that reliable.
Yeah, and
again, same process applies to other drivers on other OSs. It's the same thing. So I don't get the quarrel. I don't get the qualm. And yeah, I'll be the first to admit there are things that are missing from certain Linux drivers. NVIDIA comes to mind with certain features and functions. That's just completely a valid criticism. But you're talking performance, essentially, is what it is, like support overall. There's a reason all those server farms that render graphics that do NVIDIA cards run Linux. Ask Weta, the guys that do like all the special effects, what they use. It's going to be Linux. It's probably going to be NVIDIA drivers more than likely.
A key to touch on there, because I know people in the comments will be like, oh, GPU support is great, blah, blah, and that's not to take away that it is getting there. It's in development right now, is the best way of saying that. There's going to be issues here and there, and just because it may be supported for some tasks doesn't mean it's going to be great for others. So that's something to really consider too. However, with that all being said, it should be stated that, like with something like Ubuntu, AMD drivers are built right into the kernel. So you theoretically have perfect AMD support out of the box. At least as perfect as it's going to be for that version of Linux.
Yeah.
And I theoretically have decent driver support when I install drivers on Windows, and I theoretically have good AMD support when I install shit on a Mac. It's all theoretical until it doesn't work, you dumb idiots.
It's constantly getting better, but you're still going to have issues here and there. NVIDIA support is pretty good too. You don't necessarily even have to go online and download anything. If you have like something like Ubuntu, it will pick it up in like the additional drivers, and it should hopefully install the correct thing, and it should work pretty natively. Again, to get everything working, you might have to go and get some other pieces of software, but with something like our hardware, what we're using to test with the NVIDIA GeForce GT 750M, it picked it up no problem. Everything I've tried thus far, and which we'll see throughout videos, it supports it perfectly fine without any real hiccups. So GPU support on Linux is definitely getting better. Is it 100% there? No, I don't think anyone could admit to that. It's not the level of Windows, which has had several years on it, obviously. It's still very much in development. But however, I should say both NVIDIA and AMD are putting a lot of resources and money towards Linux support in the future. So it is a good thing. It's not nearly the amount of money or resources they're putting towards other operating systems, but it is getting better.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, moving along away from CPU and GPU support, let's talk about peripheral support. So that is keyboards, mice, and anything else you can plug into your computer. Trevor conveniently has a Logitech G602 mouse here. Fantastic mouse, great for gaming, whatever you want to do with it. And on Windows, it works great. Logitech has their own software, so you can work on customizing the buttons and utilize the software to adjust your DPI and et cetera, and it's great. However, you do not have support on Mac or Linux because Logitech doesn't make that software. And maybe Logitech is a bad example, but this honestly is across the board. Whether it is a fancy gaming mouse or gaming keyboard, or even other kinds of professional peripherals for photography and videography editing, you'll find that the software to control some of these devices isn't available. And that's rather disappointing. Even like some keyboards, that have like RGB lighting that you can adjust through software, the software on your computer isn't available, which makes peripheral support a little more difficult. However, keep in mind that yes, I can still use this mouse per se in macOS and Linux. It just doesn't give me the ability to utilize all of its fancy features because of the lack of support. But that's talking about the software side kind of with these, because there also is a complete hardware side. There is some hardware that just flat out will not work. And I think, Trevor, you have a good example for that.
Absolutely. So for example, we have a couple capture cards in the office, as well as, I know I had definitely actually had some issues with the printer. I did eventually get that working, and printers are terrible examples. A printer should just work. However, that is where you have issues. I'll give it to all operating systems to some point or another. Whatever company develops their software or whatever platform that's around, it's only what it works on that platform, unless they want to expand to others. Yeah. For example, we have a Evermedia capture card in the office. Works perfect on Windows.
For sale.
It is for sale.
not probably when this video is up, but.
We have a capture card around the office. Works great on Windows, but they never made macOS support. They never made Linux support. So there was no way for me to really use that. However, another good example is I have a Alienware keyboard, which is a gaming keyboard, all the RGB and everything. Works great on Windows, can control all the fancy features as like Eric was talking about. Unfortunately, can't do that on macOS. However, was able to find a community-driven program on Linux that actually allowed me to do all the RGB.
Give it to the community.
Which is actually something that we should mention. There is a lot of community-driven drivers and software that hopefully try to fill in these gaps, especially on Linux. Unfortunately, macOS, that community isn't as large.
No,
but
however, I mean, how long and how much effort did you have to spend to get your keyboard to work properly?
See, that is exactly the problem, because in all reality, that's what the average consumer is not going to do. They're not going to spend 30, 45 minutes trying to get their keyboard working. I'm perfectly happy doing that at times. And most people's solution would be like, oh, I'm not going to use that keyboard. Time to buy a new keyboard. But the average consumer isn't going to want to buy another $100 keyboard as my Alienware keyboard.
Oh, I hate stupid. I hate the levels of stupid. Holy crap. Okay. well, this doesn't work on Windows. This doesn't work on Mac. This doesn't work on Linux. Well, no shit, you dumb fucks. That is on the OEM. That's on them, not the OS. Blame the OEM, not the OS. For some little William Shatner there for you. Break it down nice and slow. I don't know why you guys have a hard time understanding this. That is an OEM issue. That is not the operating system issue. That is the device manufacturer not putting out the software or the support for the hardware on them, not the OS. I'm not even going to blame Mac OS for with its limited support on pretty much everything. But you guys are so disingenuous. As far as the average consumer, you guys are morons if you think the average consumer is going to go spend $100 on a fucking RBG keyboard. RBG keyboards are for gamers. Just saying. So, that's the wrong segment. And again, that's on the OEM, not anybody else. And you want to complain about community projects and all this other stuff. Let's talk all the freeware stuff that's available on Windows that was made by one dude because some paid for program or whatever did it. But, you know, the whole money thing. That's a community program. How is it any different? There will be people who will spend 35, 40 minutes looking for a free version and not always an illegal version. Again, I think you guys are simply happy to lean on your opinion more than anything else and not just look at facts.
It's about $100.
Yeah. And what about your printer?
My printer, that could be several $100s. This mouse is about, I think, a $60, $70 mouse. So for a mouse, that's some money. So, you know, you just want to make sure that whatever...
Which, again, the average consumer isn't going to spend because average consumers don't have X amount of money to go and blow on hardware. Most average consumers go for bang for buck. That's what they're looking for. Equilibrium. It's kind of basic economics, which apparently you guys tend to not quite, well, understand or, well, freaking fucking get.
For operating system you want to choose at the end of the day is you want to support everything that you already have and that you're going to use in the future. Because software and hardware support for these peripherals is honestly hit or miss on whatever operating system you're really on.
Yeah, no kidding. So moving away from the peripheral support, driver support, let's discuss, and this kind of relates with the GPU, but your display scaling. You know, a couple years ago, basically all computers have 1080p displays. It was really simple. To, you know, despite whatever computer you utilized, they all kind of looked the same. They had good scaling. But now, displays are an absolute mess. You have, you know, Mac, which has a different aspect ratio than some other Windows computers. You have a ton of different resolutions from like some 4K, 5K displays here and there. You know, it's, you know, Apple, they don't even have 4K displays. They're like somewhere in the middle, and it's just a complete nightmare. How does each operating system handle it? What are your opinions here?
So, I love this conversation because I am one of those people that will, like, you know, keep my computer plugged into an external monitor all day, go home, bring it with me, and all of a sudden, like, Windows. I hate this about Windows. I gotta like log off my user profile and log back on for the display scaling to fit, you know, my laptop.
But what about your ultra-wide display? Because ultra-wide displays are another form of displays that it can still kind of have a 1080p ratio, except they start expanding the pixels.
Essentially a correct aspect ratio.
It gets even weirder with display scaling.
See, I have to well, when I was running Windows, my daily machine, I plugged into the monitor, I literally had to restart the computer for it to scale properly. And you could just log off. I did a quick restart. It's still super inconvenient. You're in the middle of a project, you just plug it in, you want it to be right. It's terrible. Now that's one area I believe Mac OS has it right. I'm not going to say the display scaling is perfect, because it's definitely not. There's a lot of people that complain about theirs as well. However, I can plug my computer into my monitor, works, it's scaled correctly, unplug it, scale correctly in the laptop. That's all I really ask for, personally, in display scaling. I just want it to be correct, look correct, give me the correct looking resolution, especially on a Mac where you have an awkward, well, aspect ratio and resolution. Like the resolution displays 2880 by 1800, so it's a little bit weird. So you want to make sure that that display scaling is correct, since it's not your regular 16 by 9 aspect ratio. And I gotta give Linux some credit here, but then I'm gonna take it away pretty fast.
That's rude.
If you install something like Ubuntu, especially on like a MacBook, which we'll be demonstrating, the display scaling looks pretty good. I don't have too much to complain about it with. And I gotta say, on this awkward aspect ratio with this weird resolution, Ubuntu looks fantastic. I will say, and this is where I'm gonna take it away, even though KDE is one of my favorites, and when I was running it on a 4K display, it was fairly good without any issues. However, with the weird aspect ratio and the weird scaling, I am starting to have scaling issues with this. I'm thinking it's the aspect ratio that's really being a little weird.
What about ultra-wide monitors though, with Ubuntu, Kubuntu, whatever?
I'm still having issues occasionally where the best experience is to kind of restart it or to log off as well. You shouldn't have to do that with Ubuntu. And it's just some weird issues. And that kind of goes hand in hand. And this is why, even though scaling doesn't have that much to do with the GPU, it is an operating system type effect. But because graphics support is hit or miss at times with Ubuntu or any Linux, it kind of goes hand in hand where sometimes just to accept the external display correctly and accept the scaling correctly, a restart may be necessary. And it may not be so much the operating system's fault as it is maybe a bug there, a bug with the...
And you were just complaining about the same goddamn thing with Windows. Do you see a problem here? You have a lean much? Oh, I'm gonna credit it, then take it away. Give me a break.
GPU driver, a bug here, there, whatever else, and you add them all together, and it's not the most fluent experience in the world, and that's the biggest issue with that. I will say, I was having a fairly good experience overall, even going through a Thunderbolt 3 dock hooked up to monitor, so you're adding an extra layer of...
You do realize Thunderbolt 3 was in the Linux kernel since it's like first been out, don't you? So yeah, support's there. It was the first OS to actually fucking have it.
You know, things to get messed up, and the experience was relatively good with Ubuntu, with KDE, so at least hooked with my ultra-wide and on the 4K display on the MacBook, again having some weird scaling issues now. But ultimately, scaling is still an issue with all operating systems that need improvement. Again, I'm going to give Mac OS probably the best, kind of score there, if you will, just because I have the least amount of issues. But even Windows, I hate the scaling issues.
So because we're still talking about displays and whatnot, I think it is appropriate to discuss touchscreen support.
Absolutely.
Obviously back in Windows 8, really, when Microsoft went all into trying to develop their operating systems for a touch interface. Mac, there's no touchscreen Mac.
Oh, I can't touch this? Oh,
no,
it doesn't work.
You cannot. So Mac's completely out of the question here. And
Fine, Mac.
Hackintosh people that want to try to talk about touchscreens, please.
Still not optimized.
It's still not optimized.
Anyone that's used a Mac operating system with one of those USB touchscreens or something, you realize really fast, like, this really sucks.
Yeah, no, it's not good. Linux, Ubuntu, it gets rather interesting.
Yeah.
Because there is support. Whether or not it's great, well, let's just back up and talk about Windows first. So obviously, like I mentioned, Windows 8, that's when Microsoft introduced, really, a touchscreen interface. And that continues on with Windows 10. You have some big buttons when you want to click X on a window, which is fantastic. You have, tile style interfaces here and there so you can easily go through apps and all that. It has a really good experience.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hardware, obviously not your MacBook, but there's a lot of good hardware that does support like styluses, styli, whatever styli. They work really good, actually. You had a Lenovo machine that had it.
Great styli, had a great styli. Worked fantastic. However, should be said, I had that exact computer.
Stylus, you dumb. It's a stylus, you dumb fucking morons.
I might put Ubuntu on it. And,
And how was
honestly,
it on Ubuntu?
It was fine. I mean, I had, and then I'm gonna preface this once more, and people are gonna be like, you're using the wrong distro. However, with regular Ubuntu, with the GNOME,
GNOME 3.
GNOME 3, it worked fine.
Yeah.
I even had my perfect pen support, which I wasn't expecting. Everything seems very optimized for a touchscreen. Even that computer had a weird aspect ratio as well.
Yeah.
It was like the same aspect ratio as the Surface tablet, so it was a little weird. Worked perfect. I had no complaints about that whatsoever. However, put KDE on it, I did start having some more issues. I lost my pen support for whatever reason, and again, things aren't so optimized for touching. Because here's the thing, if you have a little like X button to get out of a window or something, the operating system has to know if you're touching with your finger, you're gonna probably press multiple buttons. It has to kind of know you're pushing the right button, and that's what you're trying to do. And Windows, and I gotta give Ubuntu credit, is really good with that. However, like something like KDE, it's just not designed for that type of input. It's a little more messy, it's not as clean.
Yeah, and that's when, you know, different distros in Linux really matters.
Yep.
Overall, I think it's relatively safe to say that GNOME 3 is going to work relatively well with a touch screen, but a lot of other distros that don't utilize GNOME, they utilize KDE or whatever else, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So take that with what you will, but keep in mind, even though you have a touchscreen, and even though Ubuntu with GNOME 3 will work well on a touchscreen, you have issues with app support. There's not a lot of apps designed for touchscreens. And that's not to say that Windows is perfect. Not all Windows apps are designed for touchscreen by any means.
Most aren't, I mean.
But if you wanted to get different, if you want to get apps that will work with touchscreens, that's when you can utilize their App Store, but the App Store is a conversation for another time.
And though this may have more to do with the manufacturers behind some of these, like the hardware behind the computer or the software as well, we should mention upgradability, because technically the software isn't always super upgrader friendly. There we go. I was working on
Words there.
Words,
and in all reality, you know, even today, even with the average consumer, you know, some people like desktops, and even if they're not very tech savvy, will still add different hardware and whatnot into their machines over time.
Of course.
Just to keep up with their machine. So I think that is something to make note of.
Of course. Like, I know when I built my first desktop, I built it with pretty low-end hardware with a low-end graphics card, and I had the intention of upgrading over time. If you plan on doing that because you're building your first computer, or maybe even have a laptop, because laptops aren't overly upgradable nowadays with soldered on RAM and soldered on SSDs sometimes and soldered on processors. So what's the upgrade path? So on Windows, you probably have your best case scenario than anything else, because you can put Windows in anything. You can go get a potato and practically put Windows on it. There's good things and bad things about that, but one of the good things is you can have your potato family with lots of different peripherals and accessories.
Well, at the same time though, don't forget, you know, you could also install Linux on just about everything.
We'll get there.
You know, even like a piece of corn.
Sure, corn. So you can go with your potato and corn family, of course. Yeah, no, for real, Linux can be pretty much installed on everything as well. However, the great thing about, and I'll give credit both to Linux and Windows here, they're kind of in the same camp here. You want to get a new graphics card down the road, you upgrade it, you're good to go. You want to get a new processor down the road, you're probably actually better off being on Linux at that point, because Windows activation has some weird issues when you all of a sudden you swap out a processor. You might have paid for your nice, you know, $100+ Windows activation, and all of a sudden it's gone. It's like, whoa, you can fix it, but it's still a hassle. Linux isn't gonna care. So there's truth behind that. Mac OS, unfortunately, if you're doing it on legit hardware, no Hackintosing, your upgrade path is pretty much zero, except for potentially Thunderbolt 3 peripherals,
Thunderbolt 3,
GPUs, and that's you can use on all the
upcoming Mac Pro.
Upcoming Mac Pro, maybe.
Yeah, we don't know. So
yeah, so it's a tough call. Unless you have like an older Mac Pro or something where you can still upgrade stuff. However, that hardware is getting very old nowadays, so it's a tough call. But we definitely can't give upgraded. There's not a good term for this. We can't give upgradability to the Mac as much as the other operating systems here.
So here comes the time where I get to give my opinion on hardware support. And this is fully my opinion, my experiences, so on and so forth.
Oh, joy. The asshole in the face is gonna spew some shit. Yay. God, my head hurts already. Somebody put me out of my misery.
Windows, absolutely no problem with what I do. The Mac worlds, yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with all the peripherals and whatnot that I use. They all work. And Linux, it takes a little bit of time. However, they all seem to work for me at the end of the day. And that's strictly talking about hardware.
And now for my opinion. I'm kind of on the same opinion for Eric for the most part. Windows, I've never had an issue with. It always seems to work correctly when it comes to me plugging in something and it just working. If I want to upgrade something, it works pretty much flawlessly. Mac OS, with its obvious limitations of, upgradability being, well, non-existent, and yeah, it sucks that they're losing support for some graphics cards and NVIDIA support. I do like NVIDIA graphics cards. Unfortunately, you got the newest one on an old Mac Pro or something, or Hackintosh. Won't be able to use it, that kind of sucks. But overall, it's okay. And with Linux, look, I don't have much to complain about. When I used Linux for about a month or two straight, pretty much as my exclusive operating system, yeah, there's some issues, but I got by. And if you put a little time and effort, you will get by. So as my personal opinions, it's okay. But I will stipulate that the average consumer may not be okay with some of those things.
And here's where, yet again, I call YouTube dumb fucks. Here's the difference. The average consumer does not generically go outside of the realm of Windows, maybe Mac, maybe. Very minute maybe there, no less. My problem with what you guys are saying is people have learned to just accept the flaws in Windows. That's just how they work. That's fine. They'll blame the OS. It's a Microsoft thing. It's a Windows thing. Windows has its problems, but it does what I need it to. It's no different for any user of any other OS. Doesn't matter if it's Mac or Linux or BSD or Haiku or whatever. That to any user is the norm. It's just a matter of what you're willing to accept as the norm. You two morons see everything through the eyes of Windows or a Mac. And that's it. So your opinion is skewed from the get-go. So these tests that you're doing are skewed from the get-go. So how can you honestly do a legit comparison of all this stuff if everything is skewed so much in one direction? Now, you guys can have your opinion. I don't care. But at the end of the day, you guys skew these tests so much in one way or the other to reflect your opinion that at the end of the day, this is meaningless. This is 35 minutes of my goddamn life I can never have back. And like I said, the test is skewed from the get-go. Okay, you find a similar, you want to test Mac OS? Okay, you run Mac OS on that MacBook. Find a similar piece of hardware for a Windows machine and a similar piece of hardware for a Linux machine. You go for spec for spec for spec. 3 different machines, all the similarities you can for spec to spec to spec, and then run it. I honestly think it's a BS test from the get-go because it's going to be skewed. Personally, my way of doing it, get a spec machine that is a Windows machine, a same spec Mac machine, and a same spec Linux machine from a Linux OEM, System 76, Ryzen, Dell, whoever you want, and do the comparison that way. That is the only fair way to do any of these. What you guys are doing, call it fair as being way, way too generous.
So at this point, Trevor is going to be opening up the Google Doc that we have, and this doc is going to be for our scoring. We get to put all the numbers in and figure out which operating system won this round. And we're gonna do that for you completely live so you guys can see full transparency of what we're doing.
Let me guess. Linux comes in
macOS.
Did
third.
you pay the internet bill?
No. So now that we have the spreadsheet pulled up, we're gonna go through everything.
How much do you want to bet Linux will come in third? Bar none. I'm already telling you. How many times are they, throughout this entire video, how many times were they like, and but, with a caveat, but. So let's find out.
Thing we talked about. So first off, we have the CPU support. So I think we were going to give, I guess, Windows a point and Linux a point, but Mac OS has fallen a little short.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way to do it. I mean, granted, I feel like if we could give a bonus point, it should go to Linux. However, we're not going to really do that.
Yeah, we're not giving
our point system isn't that good. But in all reality, Windows, Linux gets the point there. Mac OS.
Your point system's not that good, kind of like these videos, apparently. Holy crap.
Yeah. And so in terms of Windows for the GPU support gets 1.
I would imagine that's
Mac, it's a little tricky now. And I think the Mac operating system isn't supported enough.
I kind
Especially
of agree.
because you're losing out on NVIDIA entirely, or at least new NVIDIA. What, you're trying to Hackintosh? No, we're not talking about Hackintosh.
No, not Hackintosh.
No.
But you're right. I think it has to get a 0 again.
But Linux,
This is a tough
it's
one.
there, but it isn't there.
Yeah, it's
So,
a tough one.
I mean, I'm gonna, for the benefit of the doubt, I'm just gonna give it a 1. You know, it should work.
And I'm going to agree to disagree. I think it's there, but it's not like any other OS that doesn't have its own set of issues as far as drivers. And that's my gripe with this whole thing so far. So let's get into the next one.
For basic tasks and all that, AMD and NVIDIA are working harder and harder every day on it.
Which is a really good sign for the future of the
100%.
platform.
Hardware, peripheral support.
So specifically for hardware support, I think every operating system should get a point here. I've never had an issue exclusively where I plug a USB device in or something and it just doesn't work.
The driver support
That's a different story.
on Windows, pretty good.
Yep.
Linux, not so much. And Mac,
Oh, that's a tough one. It's a little better than Linux, but I still don't think it gets it.
but it got a 0.
I call BS. How many times have I burned an ISO, to a USB thumb drive, and Windows corrupts the ISO? Can't boot it. Go to format it. Can't boot it. Nothing but read-write errors. Requires me to go to a Linux machine, use gparted or, dis, or take your pick of partitioner and actually go and repartition for an NTSF drive in Linux for Windows to read it right. Pretty funny. Then you guys complain about printed drivers, so hey, whatever. And I call BS as far as the Mac has better driver support. Well, yeah, when the OEMs tend to support it more. Just saying. So that's an OEM problem, not the actual OS's problem. That's a vendor problem. Yet again, I state.
Yeah. So it didn't show up here yet because
Display.
you haven't. Well, there it goes. A little delayed.
Display scaling,
Windows, big fat 0.
0. Mac, ooh, we got a 1.
I'm gonna give that a 1.
And then Linux.
I'm gonna give that a 1 too.
Now touchscreen support. Windows, doing pretty good.
Perfect.
Mac, ooh, sorry, Mac.
I really hate the Mac's doing support like this early in. But
And Linux, I mean, I'm gonna have to give it a 1.
yeah, it will depend on the distro, and your experience may vary, but in our experience, I agree.
Upgradability, I mean, this is talking about your actual machine you're running an operating system on. Windows, obviously good. Mac, today, no Mac Pro, not so much. And Linux, it's gonna be the same as Windows, so
Yep, pretty
it gets
much.
a 1. My opinion here. So this is when I get to shine here. overall, this is my opinion. So I've got.
So that means more shit from the asshole on your face. Joy.
Everything to work at the end of the day for me. So I'm gonna have to give everything a 1.
Interesting choice, mister. For my opinion, this is a tough one. For Windows hardware and driver support, I'm going to have to give a 1, but then take it away pretty quick and just put a 0 there. I'm sorry, I know it's overall good, but Windows is just having some issues even with hardware right now, which we didn't necessarily talk overly about, but you can have a great GPU and a great CPU, but if something in Windows is not giving you that performance, it's the same issues we were talking about Linux not being there.
Make a valid.
Sounds like a prior criticism. So if you give Linux a 0 here, I know which way you're leaning.
Windows is kind of having some issues, so to just be fair, I'm going to give it a 0. You could argue it, but that's my opinion. You can't.
Yeah.
This is why our opinions only equal 1 point, and the rest of it is a little different. Mac OS, because of the upgradability and everything, and the fact that it's missing some hardware support and things like that, I'm going to give it a 0 as well. This is where I'm surprised about myself, but I'm going to give Linux a 1. And the reason being, and even though it isn't that much improved or technically behind Windows, the reason I'm giving Linux is because it's in the process of getting better, right? Look, Windows was great with Windows 7 and Windows 8, early Windows 10, but it's going downhill. Linux is at least trending up. Not to say Windows won't fix its problems and everything else, and Mac OS, who knows, this is a hard thing to compare. They're in a very closed down platform, but Linux is getting better. So I gotta at least give credit where credit is due that things are going up.
Of course. And then just to finish this up, you'll see we have a null category for 10. We're just going to give 1 point to every operating system. So that makes us have 10 categories that we picked from. So the winner for the hardware and driver support, funny enough, is Linux.
I don't know how that worked out, but
I don't know either, but you know, this is why we're doing it this way. We're just trying to break everything down and show you guys what we're doing, show how we're rating everything, and this will go across the board as we continue doing tests. So that is hardware and driver support. Linux has 9, Mac OS has 4, and Windows has 8.
Wow.
Trevor, anything else you have to say?
I'm surprised by the first episode, because I did not think Linux was going to win this, but just being fair and going over the facts, I guess it did.
All right, guys. Well, stay tuned for the next episode in this series. We'll catch you in the next one.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Wow. Yeah. An hour of my life I will never get back. As far as the hardware support and driver support, the end result really didn't surprise me. I will say the one thing that did surprise me was the fact that they didn't have their lean so far up there. I mean, the lean was still there. You can tell on everything that was said. It's there, but that shows where you lean personally. And I think that is a severe problem with any of these videos. Because I already... The hardware support thing, again, does not surprise me. It's got better hardware support out of the box. So my gripe with this entire thing is basically the caveats that they give. They don't really give them much for Windows. Mac, they're pretty cut and dry. But Linux is like, oh, but, and maybe, and this, and that. And it's a load of horse. Grade the experience. That's all you have to do. Don't give caveats. Don't give X, Y, and Z. And for the love of God, shut the music the hell off. 35 minutes of the same track. And by the way, I still think you guys are friggin' morons. But you guys know what to do that watch this video. And I hope you make it through it. I'm sorry if you don't. I have the things I do for my subscribers. You guys know what to do. Rate it, subscribe. Peace out.